Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming. And I can tell already that the time we have scheduled this evening is not anywhere near enough. And so I am dissatisfied with what I have here to offer. But I'm hoping that with your questions and comments and other answers, we may be able to expand this evening and then store up further questions and material for the next time, which I think has to happen fairly soon. So let's see. So everyone probably at this point has some general idea of what a pit is. And so there, this slide is pretty good. And you get the idea that the pit usually these days is in the narrow part of a warhead or in a bomb. But there is one pit in every US warhead in the modern stockpile. And they contain plutonium and they are hard to make. There is that same conical warhead on a reentry on a bus, for a so-called bus for Minuteman III. And this is a W87-0 warhead. And it is this warhead is also going to be deployed on the new Sentinel ICBM, should that system actually ever be deployed. And that's a whole other subject, but it's being upgraded this year with a so-called smart fuse that will increase the accuracy of the warhead and make it possible to use fewer warheads for the same number of hardened targets. So it's a kind of a force multiplier. In any case, NNSA is investing in this warhead, and it plays a big role in the Sentinel system, which is also where the first pits are supposed to be for. It is a variation of this warhead, which Livermore is designing for Los Alamos to make the pits of, that will be added to the present inventory of warheads in order to make it possible for the Sentinel system to carry more than one warhead at a time. They have enough of these warheads that you see here for every proposed Sentinel missile, with a lot left over. So that's why I'm showing you this picture. These exist. They are long-lived. They're very accurate. They have insensitive high explosives, and the Air Force is used to them. And we have a lot of them. So raises the question, why do we need more?
Is that a 300 kiloton warhead?
It has two yields. There's you can put a band of uranium in there and it bumps it up quite a lot. I think it's a 330 kiloton warhead, and without the band, but the band is heavy. So I guess there's a range consideration there. So we are looking now at an opportunity to comment on where NNSA will make pits, how many they'll make, and how they'll prepare for that. I wanted, before we get into complications, I wanted to put some kind of summary up front. And here it is. As far as the policy choices in the NEPA process, National Environmental Policy Act process, which is now officially begun, the policy choices work out, as far as we can tell, as follows. NNSA is going to continue to build at Savannah River, regardless of what happens at LANL. They're going to do that because LANL cannot build enough pits to sustain any politically foreseeable stockpile. While SRPPF, now that stands for the Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility, that it can by itself sustain any politically foreseeable stockpile. So production at that facility can be scaled up or down. But at Los Alamos, it can't be scaled up and quite possibly can't even hardly get off the ground. We'll see. NNSA is not going to pause SRPPF because when you do that in a gigantic project, then you lose your design team and your construction workers and contracts. There's also hundreds of millions of dollars in specialized equipment contracts. If you suspend all that, and then you sit around for 2 or 3 years, the technology changes, the contractors could go out of existence, people take other jobs. Basically, people have to make a living, so they don't just wait around for a NEPA process or for some other delay. So basically, you have ended the project. If you pause any gigantic project like this, it's a one of a kind, never been done before, as is the case for most NNSA big projects. That would be the end of it. So you just have to start all over. And that they won't do. Just if they thought they would need this, they won't stop it. And they do believe they need it. It has been theorized and examined by NNSA that a new pit factory could be built at LANL as opposed to the old one, which they are remodeling, which was not a factory, but a research and development facility. That is going to take 15 years. And it's going to cost more than the facility at SRPPF. And for reasons of many reasons, it would likely be impossible. There's very few building sites at Los Alamos National Laboratory. And another idea that NNSA has examined is to augment their 50-year-old plutonium facility with sort of outrigger modules connected by tunnels. The GIO really panned that idea. That would also take a very long time. It's not simple. And the operations at the plutonium facility would be interrupted, as NNSA found. This would also be very costly, and it is likely impossible. Since GAO kind of panned this idea, we have heard very little about it. It's just fallen completely out of discourse. The size of the facility at Savannah River is already determined. So they have a building, they're remodeling it. They're not going to build another building or make a major addition to that building. Neither are they going to make a smaller building. So they have a lot of what they call white space in that building, which they are outfitting with utilities, and so they can change the scale of the SRPPF project slightly but they won't make this too small because it's not cost effective at all to do that. There's no other locations in the country in which to make pits besides LANL at PF4 and SRS at the SRPPF project. In 2017, there were a lot of locations that were examined. None were as attractive as these, but now that billions of dollars have been invested in both places, these are the only reasonable alternatives. So that leaves the remaining policy questions as far as pit production are basically whether, at what scale, and for how long NNSA is going to try to make pits at LANL, and what environmental impact mitigations are possible and they might choose. So the NEPA process does have as a possible outcome mitigation actions which the agency could commit to in its record of decision. So for people commenting on this programmatic environmental impact statement, they could, that is to say, we could all drive bargains with NNSA in effect. You really don't have too much leverage, but if NNSA were to decide that it was in their interest to make commitments of one kind or another in the environmental field, they might do that. They might do that for public relations purposes or for intergovernmental relations purposes. So that's the summary of the policy issues as we see them here. And maybe store up questions, and we'll come back to them. Let's see what else. Oh, I wanted to just threw these slides in at the last minute to give you an idea, a feeling of the environment in the pit production world. These glove boxes are very, where the work takes place, are very complicated and expensive. And it is really a lot of work to take out the old ones and put in the new ones. And they are, of course, the old ones are contaminated. And it takes a long time to do that safely. Here's another picture of a room at PF4 with glove boxes. There's a lot of things going on here and a lot of things that can go wrong. This building is 50 years old. These are newer glove boxes. You can see the cross bracing in the anchorage of this system here. I didn't notice this before. They've had to replace the glove boxes because they have not been seismically qualified. PF4 may experience earthquakes with greater than 1 gravity of vertical acceleration. And so there's a significant seismic hazard at PF4, and that has complicated everything. So you see the cross bracing and the better anchorage. I'm going to go back to the previous slide and look at that glove box on the right. You see that just the simple columns holding up that glove box. I very much doubt that that glove box is seismically qualified. That is either on its way out or will be. Here's another picture from the beginning, somewhere, not exactly at the beginning, but several years ago, at construction at the Savannah, what is now the Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility. It was then the mixed oxide fuel fabrication facility. This big building was built for another purpose besides pit production, but it was built to handle plutonium. You can see that there are, in this picture, a lot of small rooms inside here. There have been a lot of concrete cuts that have been made and reinforcement changed inside that building. It's a very heavy building. It was permitted by NRC rather than self-permitted by DOE, which is a better and stronger process. This is an idea. That's in the middle there, that big white building. That's the same thing you saw. This is what the SRPPF layout is supposed to look like when it is done in 2032, supposedly. This building in the top is really important. The Training and Operations Center, they're building that. Well, they're modifying it now. They will, instead of having a gradual startup in the main building, they are building an exact copy of machining processes there, and they expect to more or less hit the ground running. So that will not have plutonium in it, but it will have the same machine tools, the exact copy. This is what this looks like earlier this year. You can see that they are working on the sand filter here in the foreground. And unlike at LANL, they use sand to filter the air coming out of that building. That's something they've done at Savannah River since the inception, since the 50s. It has, I'm sure, disadvantages, but one advantage is that unlike at LANL, where there's a real concern about the heap of filters catching on fire, here, that's not going to happen because it's sand outside. Here, for those who haven't seen it, is the Los Alamos Plutonium Complex. And this is a aerial picture that we took. And those are homes in the foreground, if you haven't seen this before. It's not very far from the plutonium facility to those homes. It's about 3,000 feet. It's 10 times that far at Savannah River, which is a lot safer. That flat field to the left of the plutonium facility in the background is a nuclear waste disposal site. That's why there's no buildings there, and neither will there be any buildings there. So the big flat building in the center, that's PF4, the main plutonium facility, with the ancillary buildings around it. There it is again. We were able to fly over this at altitude, and the hole to the left center below at the level below the PF4 is the kind of excavation that was created for the it was to be a second plutonium facility rivaling the first here, but we were able to stop that. And you can also see the old material disposal area in the foreground, and then those buildings on the right, just a little bit above the dump, that's a liquid waste treatment facility there for transuranic and radioactive liquid wastes from not only this facility but elsewhere at the lab. There's another picture. One of the morals of these pictures is that it's very crowded at Los Alamos. This is a small facility. It's got one laboratory level there, and it's got about a half dozen other missions. It wasn't exactly empty all these years. And so that's, and you can also see, I should have pointed this out sooner, trees, which are flammable. So Los Alamos has a very significant fire risk, and These trees come pretty much right up to the facilities. In the foreground at the bottom, I should say, you can see a kind of a cliff. That is part of the geotechnical limitations of this site, and one of the reasons that the building in that it was going to be in that excavation was eventually canceled. It's because it's too damn close to the cliff. There is a layer of unconsolidated volcanic ash, dust, basically, underlying this whole mesa that you see. And NNSA's geotechnical analysts determined that there would be really nothing to keep that building from falling off that cliff that you see in the foreground. Oh yeah, okay, here's another aerial view. Good thing we're not terrorists, huh? And those are loading, anyway, it's crowded. And this was never set up to be a production site. This is an R&D facility that is being transformed as much as possible. This is also important to understand as one kind of looks at this, trying to compare the sites. This is from a GAO report from January 2023. Down the left column here are the various functions that are required to have a pit factory. So there's 11 functions that GAO identified. The SRPPF project would provide for all of those functions except the administrative building there. At LANL, those 11 functions are scattered about in all of the different project names. You don't need to know the acronyms right now, just that there are a lot of them. So the reason I'm showing you this is that the SRPPF is an expensive project. It is expensive in part because it encompasses all of these functions. At Los Alamos National Laboratory, the money for pit production is spread among all of these elements here. The light blue one that says program is the biggest of all and is not even a construction project, or rather it contains many small construction projects. So it becomes, if you're a busy congressperson or senator, you see that the sort of nameplate Los Alamos Pit Project, which is LAP4, Los Alamos Plutonium Pit Production Project, and you compare the cost of that and the cost of the SRPPF, SRPPF is much more expensive. But really, to compare apples to apples, you have to include all these other elements. I wanted to have a political summary. I guess it's obvious, but perhaps not everywhere, that nobody in government is going to choose unilateral nuclear disarmament. If there were no adequate pit factory under construction, the US would be on a path for unilateral nuclear disarmament. We are idealistic people here, and you are as well, but we are also realists. That's what Congress is not going to just abandon nuclear weapons. Well, on the other hand, the rush to build the pits, the only place that pits can be made quickly, in theory, is at LANL. And that's the raison d'etre of the Los Alamos Pit Project, is its speed. There's nothing else that really commends it, but the theory that Los Alamos could get started sooner, that's the main reason that it's being funded. So why is this rush taking place? Well, the contractors want money. The contractors have lobbyists, and not just pit contractors, but missile contractors, all kinds of contractors. So the nuclear weapons business helps buoy the entire military industrial complex. And then there are specific pork barrel pressures that are coming from the places where NNSA has factories. It was suggested to me by the White House at one point that the primary reason for Los Alamos Pit Production project was to provide a warhead program to Livermore. Without new pits, Livermore has no new warhead. Without no new warhead, what will the Livermore weapon designers do after the 2020s? And then what will Livermore Lab become? Would there be a need for a second laboratory? Well, all those questions are wrapped up in the strategic planning that takes place between the laboratories and the White House and the DoD. Look, California has 52 congresspersons, and that's a mighty force for nuclear weapons, even if they are ostensibly progressive, some of them. Another reason is there's a kind of a fear of inadequacy, technical managerial inadequacy in pit production. The failures that have taken place to date at LANL have people spooked. There's underneath congressional testimony, you can see fear, and we know this fear because we have talked to people about it and we hear many speeches in the past. Then there are warhead milestones.
1 hour.
1 hour. Half hour in. The Sentinel schedule, and the Sentinel schedule for the missile is delayed quite a lot. First deployment of Sentinel seems to be now in the late 2030s. That is what a staff member leaked to us, and last year, and General Huser said that in January at a conference. So Sentinel's delayed, so why can't pits be delayed? That's the question one might have. The next warhead that needs pits is the W93. That's, again, that is a strange deadline, so-called. You see UK in that little list of, the UK wants this warhead, and it has something to do with a timetable with the old warhead for the UK deterrent. They will basically field the warhead that is designed for the US Columbia-class submarines. And that will be the first pit that is made at SRPPF. Then the fourth obvious reason is that a lot of people in the DC blob are panicking about Russia and China. You hear it all the time, see it all the time in NNSA briefings. They all start with Russia, Russia, bad China, etc. And they are afraid of losing the arms race. And by that, this is our comment here, that they're not really, there's no question of having a nuclear deterrent, but they want a dominant nuclear deterrent that can compel foreign policy outcomes, and that they are in the process of losing or in the process of realizing they have already lost. We are not going to have old style arms control henceforth in our analysis, because the world has changed now. And a lot of that has to do with the Ukraine war, which has gone very badly for NATO and for the US, it was a gambit that failed. Russia did not collapse. Russia is stronger than ever. And I went to the National Security Council and warned them in approximately 2015 under Obama that just begged them to stop pushing, because the result would be catastrophic. And it has been catastrophic. And official Washington has not fully understood just how fundamental the change already is.
Hey, Greg.
Yes.
Well, along that same line, and the idea of fearing of losing compellence, I think that the people in DC are totally out of touch with reality that they already have lost compellence. Based on the Russia has multiple hypersonic weapon systems that we have no air defense against. And Trump just today announced with Hegseth that we're going to have a golden dome in 2 or 3 years that'll completely protect the U.S. from ballistic missiles and all that. I mean, they're in never land. Hegseth said the technology already exists. Well, it may exist, but it doesn't exist in the United States. They can't field a prototype of a hypersonic missile.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess my point is just that their fear of losing compellence is completely out of touch with reality because they already have the weapons delivery systems are,
Yes, I totally agree with you. And so we have, reality problems in reality perception problems in DC that are very dangerous. And the last bullet here is that, and I don't think I'm virtually certain that most people who don't spend a lot of time in Washington understand this. Congress that we used to know is not the Congress we have today structurally, and there just is no oversight. And senior director at GAO said to me that he thought oversight ended in about 2008, and there has been virtually none since. And I have added here, and this may never change. And the reason is because the number of crises are multiplying so fast, and the political environment is so toxic, and the basic workload of Congress is so great that they are likely to never be able to regain the kind of small d democratic oversight that we used to have and thought we had for a longer time than we actually did. I wanted to say that we just have to be clear that that the NEPA process is not going to be a good faith exercise, that we make a comment and we get to vote on whether these facilities get built under the NEPA process. That's not going to happen. But it is a good communication opportunity and a critical one for us to talk to actors both inside and outside the government. Obviously, journalists are very important, and if to the extent that journalists can get out of their historic cliches, that'll be great. The donor community, it largely sets NGO priorities, and it's obviously important for that reason. Waste cutting is now terribly important because we have a fiscal crisis. And it's going to be, we aren't very powerful in and of ourselves, but it will be DOD and NNSA itself and the White House that are going to eventually do something here. DOD is going to come forward and say, you are cutting into programs we actually need, and you must get your house in order, you NNSA. That already has happened to some degree, but we don't have a Mr. Trump with his reconciliation bill is not saving the country any money. And So we see this in NNSA projects in the inflation that, as far as we can tell, has no end in sight. And so there's going to be changes. So but we don't know exactly what sort of changes, like war, or on the one hand, or economic collapse. Okay. I'm almost, let me see if I have any quick, I'll be very quick here. This NEPA process is going to take 1 to 2 years, have no effect, probably. The budget process, I put this in here because some people say, oh, the decisions are already made and they can't be changed. There's nothing we can do. I've heard this called recently the black pill as opposed to the red pill, or the blue pill is a black pill. Let's despair. So there are all sorts of processes, I think, in which the budget is made and changed, and there are hidden parts to it, and there are emergency parts to it. And in every one of these bills, there can be conditions and demands, which we've seen in the past. Like, fix this safety problem before we give you the last tranche of money that we are about to appropriate. That is uncommon these days, but it has happened. There are studies and audits. Those it's much easier to study something than to change it. But once it's studied by, say, GAO, then it gets in the news media, and it's part of the reality reconciliation process that Steve just told us we badly need. This last bullet says Congress just has about 2 months to review and pass the entire discretionary budget, which no one has seen except in the White House. So that is an example of how Congress is just not going to be able to do this. They cannot review all this. And we now have a more than $1 trillion budget, military budget, which is going to cost almost $8,000 per household or more if you include the interest. And this is going to be politically unbearable in over time as our economic problems develop. Meanwhile, we have a gigantic nuclear modernization spree. The price tag just grew 25% in the last year alone, which is a greater, more accurate reflection of the inflation experienced by this particular program than anything that Bureau of Labor Statistics would put out. NNSA itself is supposed to get a $6 billion increase, again, 25% year on year, via the reconciliation, the big, beautiful bill, which is now in a process, the outcome of which we don't have any idea about in Congress, but it's a huge increase. And I'll show you a graph of what that kind of looks like in a second. This morning came from Ron Paul, and I got to say that it's interesting that it's coming from a libertarian rather than from the progressive left, but we have to start somewhere. He advises the Republicans to, instead of cutting welfare for the poor, they should cut welfare for the rich, the military-industrial complex. That's certainly how it works in New Mexico, where the labs are engines of inequality, and more in the same vein. Okay, so here is a historical picture of the warhead spending of the United States from 1948 to the present, including testing and production and design and development, the whole thing, in constant dollars. This is last year's graph, and I'm so eager to fix this up for this year, but we haven't seen the exact number yet. So, but that red graph, that red dashed line that we put in there that reflected what we thought was more realistic than the fake Biden administration numbers that you see there, Well, that is where it's going, except it's even steeper. The 2026 number is going to be way up at the top of that graph. And we just don't know exactly what it is yet, so I can't do that.
It looks like the U.S. national debt.
Yes, that's it. These graphs go up like they were some kind of cartoon or something. It's unbelievable, and it's a runaway situation and reflects the not just COVID, not just supply chain problems, not just paying people more to keep them on the job, but also a kind of congestion within the program and way too optimistic assumptions over what can be done. So because of the aforementioned pressures, they just throw more money at everything. But they're not, they have 7 new warheads under development right now.
Well, all that money's borrowed, and the interest on the national debt's going up like trillions of dollars a year. It's going to exceed the defense budget, and it's precipitating a failure in the bond markets. The interest rates are starting to rise again, regardless of what the Treasury Department's trying to do. So I think we're looking at a real
Yep,
dangerous economic situation.
we are, absolutely. This is a historic, let's see, is this constant dollars? Constant $2023. These little orange bars at the bottom are in addition to what you see in the blue line. This is also old. We're at 5.2 at Los Alamos now. And Los Alamos has grown beyond all sense of proportion to be something which really doesn't even fit on the Mesa anymore. Well, that's kind of the summary picture. And I'd like to throw this open to questions and comments because there's so many topics that just don't quite fit in. Oh, well, there. That's a placeholder for all the impacts. That's commuters coming home from the plutonium area of the lab, crawling along in a traffic jam, leaving the lab at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.